His supervisor quoted something that I said at a rally in front of the governor's office and asked me why I said it. What I said was, I am not a fraud, and the 3 people who allow me to live at home by helping me get dressed, eat, and get here today are not frauds either. How he knew I said that, I don't know, because as I recall, that did not appear in the press. There were other people that spoke that day that got the press. I was not quoted. I've been quoted in the past. That was not one of my quotes. So he didn't Google me and get that. So I think it's important for us to build bridges. I think divided is how you, when they divide us, that's how we're conquered. I know it's difficult, but I think that's something that we can strive for in terms of our work as individuals and as a community. We need to be protected too. That's fine. We don't want fraud. We want it exposed, but we want to be protected from it too. Yes?
I think what is going on in my mind right now is the role of the public authority, because I come from Butte County, and I do know that before one is hired or referred or given to a client, they go through orientation. But I don't know how much knowledge or education the public, all the counties who have public authorities, how much they do realize these things are actually happening, so that this prevention can start from the very beginning. So this could be pointed out to the people while they're being hired or while they're being referred to their clients. So I'm just wondering whether there is any collaboration, how much they know that this problem is actually happening and it should be pointed out right at the time that people are getting their orientation.
What I have provided in the back, in the side of the room, is the brochure that is given out to every new provider at the orientation session. It's a brochure that is published by the state, and it specifically spells out what's allowed, what's not allowed, how to avoid fraud, the fraud alert number. That's for your taking in English in the back. I think I have about 20 copies in Spanish. In addition to that, for those of you who come from counties where there's a sizable Spanish language population, I have a few copies of the CD of the video that the state has produced. I have that in Spanish. Unfortunately, I wasn't given any in English for some reason. But so you can see yourselves what new providers are being taught, are being told. And frankly, I sat through the orientation session myself recently. I saw the video. I do not find it offensive. I mean, there are handcuffs, but that's life, okay? I think it presents the situation fairly and well, succinctly, both in the verbal presentation by the county worker and in the videotape that is shown that is mandated by the state throughout every county. So if you do need a Spanish language copy, just let me know and I'll be glad to share one, give you one.
I have a concern as I've listened to you talk about fraud and the fact that the people who receive in-home support services, whether they're seniors or disabled or both, are a very vulnerable population, a very dependent population, a population that's easy to prey upon. And I guess I'm just concerned that if they are subject to fraud and this kind of attempts by their providers, what other fraud are they susceptible to? I mean, how many magazine subscriptions have they bought? How many investments have they been duped into? I mean, is there some way of looking and seeing if there's a chain of fraud that's being perpetrated on these people?
Well, you've definitely put your finger on something that's really important. And yes, undoubtedly there are people that, they're committing IHSS fraud, but they are also abusing the person they're supposed to be caring for financially. A woman I'm prosecuting right now stole $33,000 from the IHSS program, but she got over $170,000 from an elder inside of 14 months, drained her for her whole equity of her home, everything, her credit cards, her checks, you name it. There are websites right now, and I wish I could tell you one. I emailed our elder abuse to ask for one because she's talked about it at places I've been. But you can imagine there's anything you can find on the web. But the website literally teaches you how to gain the trust of an elder or a dependent adult for the purpose of stealing from them. And it counsels you to do things like always take their side to any end and defend them to anyone that may say something bad. It teaches them how to trick people, and there are people out there doing that. How much of that crosses over into my world, I don't know, but I would say that in any case that we look at, we try to look at it comprehensively. And we talk to whoever the consumer may be. There was one recently that called our investigator and just said, I'm afraid to fire my provider, but I don't want her to work for me anymore. So my investigator did that for him. But then in talking to him, found out, well, on her way out, the provider stole his couch, of all things, and he slept on his couch. And so she got a hold of his son who was living in the Bay Area, and they got him a new couch. The son didn't realize how much the father had gone downhill because over the phone he sounded okay. And we try to look at that. We communicate with our social workers, with the public authority. We let people know that the public authority does have a registry of pre-screened people. I think you're right that a comprehensive approach is necessary. We try to do that, but I think that as a state we could go a long way in doing that, in looking at not just one part of the problem, but the whole problem. And I think that it's, exactly what you said is happening all the time.
One of the handouts that's available on the back table is it's printed on two sides of the paper, and it's titled Tips to Avoid Being the Victim of Fraud is one side of it. And those are things that I got in an orientation session that I went to before I was even a consumer. And yet, I didn't do those things because it seemed to me that the person that I was accepting into my home to help me so personally, I had to trust, and I trusted them. And I didn't do things like put my checks and my jewelry under lock and key and only allow a member of my family to have access to them. So I did have identity theft twice. I've been married 3 times. I do not have a single wedding band left. Okay, these are cute little stories, but they're not so cute. I'm smart, but I wasn't that smart. My heart led. I trust my providers. You'll probably see me with the one that came up with me. I now only go through the registry of the public authority to hire caretakers. The caretakers I have been with me for quite some time now, and I do trust them. But it's much easier if I kind of protect myself. And those are tips to prevent being the victim of fraud, but there are also tips here, what to do if you are a victim, how to handle yourself, who you have to notify, and then on the other side, what I learned from being investigated for fraud. What kind of record keeping? As a consumer, we have a responsibility. If we can't do it ourselves, then we need to find a friend or a family member that will help us keep track of every time card we submit to the county. So we have a copy. So if someone says, you know what, you're under investigation, like happened in my case, I can say, come on over and tell me your questions and I'll show you the papers that prove I'm not a fraud. I have a file on every one of my providers. So I have their social security number. I have the paperwork I sent into the county. I often send in my time cards along with a cover letter to my worker, and I send it registered mail, return receipt requested, after she told me she couldn't find the time cards that I had submitted for several months. And the fraud investigators told me that was one of the things that caused them to investigate me. So I'm not taking a chance anymore. Keep good records. I know it's hard when you're not working at full tilt, but it behooves us to protect ourselves. And also, the biggest strength we have is votes. And think of the election coming up, and every election, who can best represent us?
Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I will stick around. Otherwise, you have my contact information for the future.